Hi, I'm Connor Yeck, and I'm originally from Ludington, Michigan, and I'm currently a doctoral student here at the University of Cincinnati. And this past spring, I was incredibly honored to learn that I'd been chosen as the winner of the Tennessee Williams New Orleans Literary Festival's poetry contest. And while I'm looking forward to experiencing the festival firsthand sometime in the near future, I'm equally excited to be able to read these winning poems and share them here now with you. Before I begin, I'd obviously like to thank everyone who has been organizing this and I've been speaking to, especially given the past few months, Tracy and Teresa, and also Beth Ann Fennelly, who originally chose these poems and saw something in them. These poems were submitted as a short sequence, and the name of that sequence was Be Real, and that name sort of was chosen out of this sort of ongoing fascination or obsession that I'm currently on. We're just considering poetry's connection to pop culture, whether that be film, television, or radio, and what can be taken from both mediums in terms of content and form and just inspiration. And I'm not sure if it's sacrilegious to say, but I first found Tennessee Williams through film. So I was incredibly excited to have these poems chosen, and that the judges felt that they linked up in some way with the themes they're working with. So the first poem in this series came out of, I was always really fascinated with monster movies and movie monsters. And when I was thinking about the sort of pantheon of classic monsters, the Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein, I always realized that the creature from the Black Lagoon was included in that group, and it always felt like a fifth or sixth wheel. And then I learned that the monster also has another name, and the name is the Gill Man with a hyphen. And I was just, that really stuck with me. I thought it was a little lame. And so this poem is just looking at that entity in some way or another. So the poem's name is Name Change, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Because you know and I know on your I-9 it's the Gill Man. And what the hell kind of monster banks its terror on typeface alone, that drawbridge hyphenate, that arroyo blink between beast and watcher, water and land, you and us, and really, what's the first to go in a crush? Breath between words. So roll this, my fear for, not of you. Imaginary third act shambles, string music and tension hook, and the National Guard leveling carbines at the surf. Floodlights on flatbeds. And you, at last, erupting from the combers like it's open swim. But the scientist with the bullhorn is just too giddy this time, and says the line, but not quite right, screaming to the tropical stars, oh Christ, it's Gilman, and in his rush, destroys you. Shucks your honorific the. Snaps compound dash like a golf pencil, and are you golfing buddies, neighbors, all the danger, the chasm between human and animal spackled shut, Gilman, surname now smoothed, now fit to marry, hold office, borrow yard tools, and who says it can't be done? There's no other monster I'd rather loan the mower to, and why? Yes, the name, and yes, that brief, feverish stint on the Colgate Comedy Hour, your lowest personal tide, bursting out the wood crate like an ill-packed mannequin as Costello flops and faints at your feet, but a little more. Origins, mostly. Tell me another who wasn't cursed or summoned or birthed or even made, cooked up by a dunk tank's worth of nuclear sludge tipped into the watershed, but flat out found, lapping backstrokes in the Amazon. So when the ichthyologists first saw you from their skiff, before spear gun and depth charge, it wasn't terror they felt, but a parent's unease. This thing before them unevolved and unsolved, best kept from good company. You, our own blunder years in flesh and scale, hand-me-down and missing link and swimming proof of old Devonian spat, must we go land or sea? Your websome claws planted on both sides of the shallows, waiting out the clock that stopped running, and what I think I am trying to say is you're heavy, Gil, the whole story, and to think of the kids. Who would dress up as you on Halloween and how? Deep green pantyhose and body paint and a plastic mask frozen in its "I'm about to be struck by a speedboat" gawp, and the wearer having to explain throughout the night, like a marquee tagline, again and again, "I am my own grandfather, the before and nothing after." So this second poem looks at, I'm especially fascinated with the place of the atomic in American culture. And I was really struck a couple of years ago when I found out, or started listening to civil defense PSAs around the late 50s and early 60s, and that they would hire out big names of the time to do these little sound bites that could be played, obviously, on the radio. And it was just so jarring to hear these familiar voices talk about fallout shelters and flying glass and radiation, and imagining hearing that on your commute to and from, work. So this voice looks at that, or this poem looks at that, and there are different voices threaded throughout that take direct quotes from these civil defense sound bites that were recorded. And the title of the poem is "Boris Karloff Teaches You Patterns of Survival." Civil defense is common sense, and as sure as the distance between you, as the 6 decades strung between his lips and yours, the voice clipped like a tap number, like a few words over hedges in porch light, this compline of neighborly concern. No pause, and the website's algorithm will choose. Slot another atom bomb PSA, a voice dead or not, waxed and rippled, and another, until they telethon together. Fuse in some starful tribute to survival that makes you wonder what stacking of personalities might terrify the least. In Groucho, you hear the cigar, the first in first aid kit pinched into foist, and the way a radio jockey could conduct it all. Pair Bob Hope warning, flying glass can maim 100,000, to Connie Francis, her timber snowing and a microgroove crackle, prepare today for tomorrow, with something by the platters in between. Each recording breath length, thought length, not worth turning the dial length. And why would you and how, when Johnny Cash promises we'll make it, like a sun-shocked figure on a roadside, if we learn to help ourselves? And still you only return to one. Loop it like song, when Joni James trips, hiccups, slips the axe head of a single between "you can't see fallout" and "so you must take shelter." The doubter's air. The recording booth gulf where word electroplates to meaning. The only time it seems a voice knows what it's read. Where it doubles back, then down. An entire continent alive in its stutter. And this final poem looks at kind of a figure that I end up revisiting again and again, and that's Robert Oppenheimer. And this poem looks at sort of 2 TV appearances that he had in the 50s and 60s. One in 1955, which took place kind of at his post-war peak. He's incredibly energetic, exuberant. This is the time when the physicist was a sort of superhero in a way. And then another in 1965, which is towards the end of his life. It's after some House Un-American hearings. He's been sort of disgraced publicly. And the difference in them just really struck me. And being able to watch these clips and kind of follow them in some different ways. So the poem is split into 2 parts. And the title is Hospice Oppenheimer, 2 Interviews. 1. See it now, 1955. Our man answers like a bird dog on the fringe of thrill. Headwork, part pivot, part dip, eyes up and down, a pump jack bobbing for Texas crude. I once think there's avian tilt to the fathered face, the way the black ingots of his brows settle when, for warm-up, they ask him about Einstein. Does he work down the hall these days? Does he call? And what it's like not having to teach. The office is a storm cell of pipe ash and Chesterfields. books whose titles the camera cannot read and I am after. Cut to blackboard balletics. Robert slashing palms and loom-like strokes over equations chalked like buckshot, sea-scrawl, scars, his hum a portage between particle charge and cloud chamber, until, for a cutaway of interstellar briefness, the interviewer looks to the camera as if asking, well, do we stop? Reeled in, Robert won't sit. More leans over the desk as if to tackle. He says an idea cannot be frightening, only our understanding of it. 2. The decision to drop the bomb, 1965. Backdrop. Tarp or slate or an old opener for the Twilight Zone gone off air the year before. What to say of the face, cropped and shorn 1,000 times. Barn owl, gourd, hermit. Cheekbones shunting under skin in a pittance of mesas, the bright tectonics of grief long coaxed by house hearings, and the cancer rounding the cells of his throat like a chain letter. If I cover his mouth with my hand, it seems the video has stalled. Buffers in frayed and fen-like resolution. The head does not move. Focus. I will say this again. When he speaks of the Gita, and the laughter and sobbing of technicians on the desert floor, he looks for 53 of this Earth's seconds into a space we would not see. Lone motion, a knuckle-brushing nose, eyes as unfinished roadways, eyes as coins ripped from circulation, a contemplation rhymed and damped and saddled and dissolve. What I knew in my grandmother's stare, her sore of morphine, palimpsest, palliative drift. Last gaze tunneling for weeks into the sanctity of a distant ceiling corner and looking where I would not know. Some clip show of life lived out. Pine-bitten horizons, dunes. The car trapped in a rut of driveway ice one mid-century November. Eyes tracking what? Coming down whole miles above. Thank you so much for listening.